In this tutorial, we'll show you how to take a flat sounding orchestral mix like this and use reverb and EQ to give it real depth and space, like this. Reverb can be used to move sounds towards the perceived front or back of the 3D soundstage. We start by throwing together a quick orchestral passage comprising strings, brass, wind and tuned percussion sections using Sonokinetics Minimal library for contact. We then add to this with the snare drum part courtesy of F-Expansion BFD3 and render the whole thing as 5 tracks of audio. Before we can start to position our sounds in space, we're going for strings up front, brass and winds in the middle and percussion at the back. We need to get a rough mix together, just in terms of levels and panning. Tweaking the volume levels gives us a more palatable balance. Since each of our tracks is a whole orchestral section recorded in stereo, we can't control positioning at the individual instrument level, so our panning offsets are kept small. Okay, we're ready to introduce our reverbs. We set up 3 plugins on auxiliary buses in our DAW, naming them Close, Medium and Far. Close and medium, we load up our very own CM verb, with close set to the small, short studio preset and medium set to the bigger, longer, medium hall. Far reverb, we opt for Valhalla DSP Vintage Verb's massive, huge synth hall preset. All 3 are 100% wet. We want the string section up front, as it would be placed in a real orchestra, but still with a sense of space beyond the width of the dry, close-mic'd recording, so we send it to the close reverb. We also tweak the reverb itself, raising the reverb time to 1.8 seconds and upping the low cutoff to 226 Hz. This last adjustment is just a mixing nicety that takes the very lowest frequencies out of the reverb so as to not unnecessarily take up headroom. Our brass and woodwinds will share the 3D middle of our soundstage, and to that end we send them both to the medium reverb. Reverb time 3.22 seconds. Again, we shave off the bottom of the signal, but this time the cut is applied at just 100 Hz, since the low end of the brass above that actually works well within the reverb. We place the snare off in the distance by sending it to the far reverb. At the current vintage verb settings though, it's way too bright and long, so we reduce the time, high frequency damping, and pre-delay. We don't want any noticeable slapback. Lowering the damping darkens the top end, pushing the snare even further away. We also send the percussion to this reverb just to give it a touch of ambience. The snare still sounds rather too present for our liking. We've adjusted the damping on the reverb to darken it, but we can also directly EQ the snare itself to make it more distant still. Dialing the top end will achieve this. Using our DAW's built-in EQ, we apply a high cut filter at around 5 kHz with a small hump at the cutoff point to retain impact. We also up the snare channel by about 3 decibels to compensate for the loss in level. Applying the same principle in the opposite direction, we give the strings a high EQ boost to bring them further to the fore, then lower their overall volume by 3 decibels to keep them under control.
Download over 30 exclusive plugins. Get hundreds of pro-quality samples and power up your production skills with in-depth tutorials. We break it down for you step by step, and you'll see exactly how it's done in expert video guides and producer masterclass sessions with pro producers. Get all this and more with Computer Music Magazine every month on iPad and iPhone, PC and Mac, Android, and in print.